but conveniently occupied. The biopaper was due the following day, and we had been spending so much time anticipating other things that we had neglected it. We lay side by side that night, and even though we were doing quite possibly the most boring and unromantic assignment on amoebas ever, I still tried to be all affectionate to my girl, with my feet and arms and sideways smiles, as we played footsie in the air. We were becoming one of those gross couples that often made me consider regurgitation. I kept doing it because it made her smile as she chewed her pen and blushed sideways at me. I wanted to snort. She blushed at playing footsie, but she could put my dick in her mouth with no reservations. That's my girl. The memory almost made my lips twitch as I stared at Carlisle from across the desk. That goddamn clock broke me out of my good memories and into the here and now, as we continued the stare down, both of us silently refusing to break. My mouth was so goddamn dry, and I was trying to exude this whole cocky confident posture as I sat entirely still in the stiff leather chair. But truth be told, I was fucking terrified. Carlisle broke first.
"You were sleeping with Bella,"
he stated flatly, his hands clasped in front of him on the desk, and a completely blank expression covering his face. I imagined this was what he looked like when he told a patient they were dying. I fought against the bile rising in my throat. I can't sleep without Bella. The honesty thing seemed like a good route. For now. He shook his head slowly.
"How did she get into your room?"
Still blank. I looked away then, because I couldn't bear the accusation in his eyes. When I admitted it, she climbed the lattice up to my balcony. I replied grimly. Honestly, it was silent as I stared out the window. The sun was just barely rising, and fuck, I was thirsty as hell, and the chair was becoming more uncomfortable with each tick of that goddamn clock. I refused to squirm under the penetration of his stare.
"How long?"
he whispered curtly. I fucking sighed, reconsidering this honesty thing, because my answer wasn't going to go over well. "Since Thanksgiving," I mumbled dreadfully. Honestly. He made the oddest choking sound, and I could just imagine his chin falling as he gaped at me from across that desk. I remained still and stiff.
"Why, Edward?"
he asked in this miserable voice that was entirely inflected with hurt and confusion. I snorted. "Like you fucking care what I have to say anyways." I chuckled humorlessly, and shook my head as I kept my eyes locked on the scenery behind the window. "Pray."
"I do care,"
he whispered again, still sounding hurt and making it more difficult for me to remain still. And I knew he cared. Fundamentally he did. But nothing that came out of my mouth was going to make this situation any better. On the other hand, nothing I said could make it any worse. And all of the fucked up scenarios left brewing ignorantly inside of his curious mind were likely far worse than the truth of the matter. So I said, fuck it. I told him everything. Because the honesty was all I had going for me, and I was praying the satiation of his constant curiosity would buy me some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. So I told him about the nightmares, nearly snorting at the word, and I never met his gaze as I repeated our nightly routine, in an emotionless, monotone voice. The balcony, the dinners, the reading, the sketching, the bathroom, the caresses, and the way I held her to make her feel safe. The motherfucking lullaby. The sleep, and the way we woke up rested and happy. How she'd climb down, and the next night we would do it all over again. Honestly, the entire story and recollection of our nightly events. Well, I left out the whole desensitizing thing. It was just fuel to the fire that was already raging between our two houses. But the fact remained, the story of our sleeping habits was everything he had been dying to know without even fucking realizing it. And I was so pissed off and bitter that I had to confess it under pressure that I couldn't look him in the eye. The room was quiet for so long, and my fingers twitched and my mouth was just so fucking dry. I wanted some water, or just anything. Mostly Bella. I needed to know if she was okay. More than I needed this conversation or his understanding. I just needed to make sure my girl was alright. Carlisle sighed as I kept my eyes fixed on the window.
"You never told me about these nightmares, Edward."
And he sounded so goddamn accusing that I finally darted my gaze to his. I was pissed off. I don't have to tell you everything. I spat venomously as my eyes narrowed. And what the fuck were you doing? He cut me off before I could even finish with a slam of his fist on the wooden desktop.
This is my house.
He sounded firm and all fucking defiant, and it made me want to laugh at him. Instead I knew I had to pull out another tactic. The worst and most degrading tactic of all. I let my face fall and soften. Just turn your head, Carlisle, I said in low voice as his eyes widened. This was something that probably wouldn't work, but I had been considering it for the last hour. I leaned forward, closer to him, as he gaped at me. Just look the other fucking way, and make shit so much easier on us. I begged with my eyes in low whisper. Yes. I fucking begged. And watching me go to such great lengths should have made him realize how utterly fucking important this was to me, to Bella. Please? I pleaded in a desperate whisper. When he didn't answer me. Then suddenly, he began laughing. But it wasn't funny like he was laughing at me, or even mildly authentic amusement at my suggestion. It was a wild, maniac laughter that made me shift uncomfortably against the stiff leather.
Are you on drugs again?
He asked in an awestruck voice, with a smile that didn't seem like a smile at all. It was mocking, and just as maniacal as the earlier laughter. I remained silent. Because that was a low fucking blow. And he knew it. Carlisle stood then, running his fingers through his hair. He trailed off and darted his eyes around the room.
Guardian.
He concluded softly, carefully avoiding the F word where he was concerned. Because he wasn't.
Do you honestly think?
He put his palms on the desk and leaned forward towards me while he bored his gaze into mine.
That I can just ignore this?
He asked. I nodded at him rather confidently. I didn't see any reason why he couldn't. It wasn't against the law. I had checked all the books and websites, and had found no legal objection to two children sleeping in the same bed.
It's me.
He hissed, narrowing his eyes at me. That was one kink in the entire idea. Convincing her that it was okay. Carlisle knew that better than anyone because he was closer to her than anyone. That was one of those indiscretions I was saving for the dickhead tactic. He shook his head again, and it felt annoyingly condescending, as he smiled at me, the same smile that wasn't really a smile at all.
You'll be so lucky if you're even allowed to see Bella anymore after what happened last night.
It was my turn to stand up and see. That's fucking bullshit, Carlisle, I yelled, slamming my palms loudly onto the hardwood of the desk. And just really fucking pissed that the previous night's events were being so epically blown out of proportion. His jaw dropped at my outburst, and then it was his turn to yell.
No, Edward. Bullshit is sneaking a girl into my house every night for the last 3 months.
His face was red, and we were staring each other down again. There was a large vein bulging from his right temple that almost made me feel guilty at the fact I was causing so much turmoil for this man. Almost. Not quite. He could tell, as he dropped his face and continued shaking his head while mumbling shit under his breath.
Of all the stupid ridiculous, this stops it all.
Neither of you can stop me from seeing her, I said simply, and I sat back down in my chair with a glower at him. I'll be 18 in 2 weeks. I raised my eyebrows and dared him to deny my logic. I could move the fuck out if I really need to. It was true, and a particularly distasteful way of settling this entire thing, but I could hardly give a shit. Bella would be 18 in a few months. We could tough it out until then. Carlisle's face paled slightly, and even though we were talking now and not screaming, we were both seething in our own silent way. He evaded my threat successfully.
You had sex with Bella,
he stated in the same flat voice he had used earlier in the conversation. I nearly smirked triumphantly when he didn't argue my point. But he was going for another low blow. No, I replied, deciding I much like monosyllabic replies rather than the screaming and yelling.
No.
He raised his blond brows. Yes, I confirmed.
Yes.
His brows went impossibly higher on his forehead. No, I shouted, getting a little fucking annoyed and feeling betrayed by the simplicity of the monosyllabics. He appeared more than a little frustrated himself as his brows fell, his blue eyes flashed in an annoyance I hardly thought Carlyle capable of.
Why do you insist on lying to me, Edward?
He hissed as his eyes narrowed once more. This was where the whole honesty thing got fuzzy. Maybe. Okay, so I had no fucking clue whether or not I was telling the truth when I denied having sex with Bella. It was all confusing as hell, and I was tempted to ask him to define sex so that the semantics of the term could make my response truthful. Honestly, maybe. I didn't answer. Instead I let my thoughts drift to a song. The song that started all this bullshit. I wasn't sure if I could blame it all on a song, but I needed to blame something, because I couldn't blame my girl, and everyone else was already putting plenty of the blame on me. I was just sitting on my bed 8 hours earlier with Bella while I ate my food. Things were so much different then. Better. Happier. Fucking perfect. And it was really messed up how it could all go downhill so quickly. She was reading a book while I was thoroughly immersed in the meal she had brought for me. The silence was comfortable and relaxing as I sighed and ate the meal in contentment, occasionally peeking up at her to note the way her hair cascaded onto the pages of the large book in her lap as she gazed down at it. But then I heard her humming. And it wasn't so much the fact she was humming, but the song she chose that made me narrow my eyes at her in a blatant glare of utter disdain. When her eyes finally drifted to mine, they widened, and her humming abruptly stopped. Which confused me a little, but I just covered the container, and decided I had enough of that shit. I fucking flew at her, and I think I probably shocked her for a second until my hands found her sides and I began tickling her senseless. Because my girl humming the Scooby-Doo theme song couldn't possibly go without proper retaliation. I told her so, as she attempted to wiggle free from my hands. And when the words left my mouth she began fucking giggling. A lot. I just kept tickling her, moving to straddle her, so I could get a better angle at her sides. I found she was quite ticklish there as she writhed relentlessly under me and her giggles transformed into breathless snorts. Her head thrashed from side to side as she gripped my wrists to restrain me, and my body lurched up and down with her every chuckle. It was comical the way she began begging me through gasps to release her. It made me smirk. I didn't stop until her face was red and she had tears streaming down her cheeks. And when my hands finally left her she was panting and tense, anticipating further attacks of retaliation, as my hands lingered in the air at her sides. But then the weirdest thing happened. I was leaning over her, smirking and triumphant as she gazed up at me with watery eyes that shone. And suddenly, the whole atmosphere of the room changed. The charge between us grew and crackled as our smiles slowly disappeared, and we gazed into each other's eyes knowingly. She smoothed back a lock of hair from my forehead with her soft, little fingers. It was so fucking tender and sweet that I cupped her cheek and gently rubbed it with my thumb. Her brown eyes were intense with the weight of what was occurring. The crackle and the growing tide of emotions in our gazes and touch. Then I lowered my lips to hers, just barely sweeping them with my own as I gazed into her eyes, and the crackle in the air grew and amplified even more. Because this was the feeling. And we both knew it. Felt it. Her eyes became hooded and our breaths began to quicken against each other's parted lips as our gazes intensified further with lust and love and affection and tender. Then my hands were grasping the blanket on either side of her head as I hovered above her and took her tongue into my mouth. It was sweet like cookies and I fought to keep it tender as we kissed, and I gripped the blanket like it was the only thing holding the teenage hormonal motherfucker in. She removed